Hello, this is Catherine from Accelerated Reader. Today I will be reading Chapter 17 from Two Worlds, a novel of friends and foes from strange places by Laura T. Lee. Before I begin reading, I would like to give a big thanks to the author for sending me this book to read on my channel. In the description below, I have included links where you may find and purchase this book. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Wow, Lily said. Where are we? Stacy, Lily, and Tara had entered a humongous chamber. Inside stood a robot the size of a 3-story building, complete with mechanical hands and legs. The robot glowered at Lily. Instead of eyes, a window similar to a helmet visor was in its place. This, Tara said proudly, is the NPS bot, also known as the nitrogen-powered super speed bot. We call her Sally. We had one other robot named Carl, but he disappeared 20 years ago. Tara pointed at Sally. Let's go. The three entered the robot through her right leg, climbing a set of stairs until they reached the cockpit, which turned out to be the head of the robot. Lily looked at the controls, or rather the lack of controls. How does Sally work? She asked. Tara gave her a helmet. Put this on, she said. Lily pulled the helmet over her head and the visor lit up with images and words. She read the light instructions. Okay, she thought. To walk, say, commence walk. Any movement of the pilot, me, causes the robot to move in the same way. To use a weapon, a list will pop up in my visor. If I'm done reading, say, instructions dismissed. Instructions dismissed, Lily said. The lights on her visor disappeared. She turned around to say something to Tara and Stacy. Creak! The robot moved and Lily nearly lost her balance. She saw that Tara and Stacy had secured themselves into chairs. If you want to get out, turn around and punch the wall in front of you, Tara said. This is going to be good, Stacy grinned. Lily turned around and made a punching motion with her hands. Crack! The rock wall crumbled into dust and sunlight rushed in. In the distance, Lily could see a building surrounded by dwarves. Commence run, she said. Sally surged forward at an amazing speed, leaving the rock chamber far behind. Let's do this, Stacy yelled excitedly. In the 2 minutes the robot reached the building. Commence manual walk, Lily said. Hologram images of boots appeared over Lily's shoes. She stepped forward and flattened a large group of dwarves. She turned right and ordered the weapons list to show up. Her visor lit up with a list of different weapons. Her eyes locked on a weapon. Sword, she called. Lily watched as one of Sally's hands retracted into the wrist, replaced by a wicked-looking sword. Ping, ping. The dwarves had begun to fire their weapons. Bullets of light harmlessly bounced off Sally's armor. But Lily wasn't going to take any chances. She deflected the rest of the bullets with her sword and was just about to punch the dwarf building into pieces when the whole thing exploded. Kaboom! Sally was thrown backward from the ruins of the dwarf building. Another robot emerged. It was the same size as Sally. Tara gasped. Carl! Lily climbed to her feet. Carl, the robot, rushed toward her. At the last second before impact, Lily could see a grim-faced dwarf looking at her through his visor. Lily held up her fist. Bong! Carl staggered backward, and Lily took her chance, jumping on top of Carl and hitting him with her sword. Unfortunately, the sword clanged harmlessly off Carl's armor, not even scratching it. Carl took out a sword of his own, but instead of hitting the armed torso and limbs, he drove the weapon into Sally's left knee. The effect was immediate. Sally fell onto her side with a groan of metal. Lily's helmet visor glowed red as she tried to get the robot to stand up. As Sally climbed to her feet, Carl charged her again, sword raised. Lily rapidly scrolled through her list of weapons and selected a giant cannon. The cannon slid out of Sally's other wrist. As it warmed up, the sides glowed a bright orange. Momentarily confused, the pilot dwarf brought Carl to a stop. The cannon fired. Kaboom creak! Superheated plasma shot out of the cannon. The plasma slammed into Carl, and he toppled over with a sound of creaking and bending metal. When the robot got up again, Lily could see that all of Carl's joints had melted together. Lily swung her sword at the partially disabled robot. The metal blade sank deep through the robot's softened armor, and it went still. The pilot dwarf climbed out of Carl and shook his fists at Lily. She waved back and fell over as Sally was suddenly lifted into the air. Lily yanked off her helmet as she climbed to her feet. Tara and Stacy had unbuckled their seatbelts. Through Sally's front window, a large spaceship had positioned itself in front of the robot. Ropes were attached to Sally's hands. Lily realized the spaceship was lifting Sally into the air. "We need to get out of here," Stacy yelled. Tara herded Lily and Stacy down 2 sets of stairs and yanked open a trapdoor in the floor. The door opened to reveal an escape pod made for 2 people. "You 2 go," Lily said to Tara and Stacy. Before they could protest, Lily ran back up the stairs. The interior of the cockpit was freezing. Lily realized that Sally was so high up in the sky, the temperature had dropped. A loud hiss told Lily that the escape pod was ejecting. If she didn't go now, she wouldn't get off the robot. Lily sprinted down the stairs and dropped through the trap door. The escape pod was already 20 feet away. She tossed the bag of itch grenades into the sky. She wouldn't need them. Lily reached into her pocket and brought out the ultra-explosive grenade she had kept from earlier. She pushed it into a bunch of wires running down the wall. The escape pod was now 50 feet away. Pressing the detonation button on the bomb, Lily jumped out of the robot as it exploded in a giant ball of fire and debris. Kaboom! The shockwave from the blast threw Lily toward the escape pod. She slammed into the pod and hung on for dear life as it zoomed away. Lily tried not to look down as the escape pod passed through several clouds. Thunk! Lily glanced to her right and saw a bomb attached to the pod. That was not good. She managed to crawl her way over the top of the escape pod. She hung upside down from the windshield and banged on it. "There's a bomb on the pod," she screamed. The wind snatched away most of Lily's words, so her yell sounded more like "there's bomb pod." Fortunately, it was enough. A wide-eyed Tara nodded and grabbed 2 backpacks. She handed one to Stacy and pulled a lever. A hatch popped open on the top of the pod, and Tara and Stacy shot out of it. Lily jumped and grabbed Tara's foot. A parachute sprouted out of Stacy's backpack. Tara activated her own parachute, and their free fall slowed down to a controlled descent. Above them, the grenade exploded. Surprisingly, there was no fire. Instead, magma flowed out. In 15 seconds, the escape pod was a blob of melted metal, which plummeted down to the ground hundreds of feet below. As Lily and Tara watched the fiery wreck tumble down to earth, Stacy cleared her throat. "Well," she said, "do you have any idea when we will get to the ground?" The problem was, they didn't. The end. Stay tuned for Chapter 18. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the description below, I've included links where you may find and purchase this book.